Welcome to Threads of Enlightenment, a podcast devoted to helping you overcome challenges in your life that prevent you from becoming the best version of yourself. Each episode features interviews with people from all walks of life about their journey of self-development and the principles they utilize to overcome their fears to achieve their desired outcome. Ready to be enlightened? Here's your host, Ken Primus.
Welcome to another episode of Threads of Enlightenment. Guys, you know this is my favorite piece right here because I get an opportunity to welcome our guests because I know they're coming with a couple of things I deem very expensive. Time. What a precious commodity offered to every single human being on this planet. But time, if you do not understand her, she will expose your sins. But if you do understand, you will love her, you will cherish her, everything becomes sweet, if you will, your conversation, your interactions, because you understand the value of time. The other is the journey. The journey is a powerful creator. It created these gentlemen before us, and that journey has deposited some stuff inside of them. And we label those stuff, those rich stuff that is in there, wisdom, knowledge, insight, understanding, foresights, all those wonderful things. And we want to partake of it. And so we want to welcome them and thank them for coming and sharing all of that precious stuff with us. Guys, Robert, and Gary, thank you for coming to Threads of Enlightenment.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, Ken. This is great. We look forward to it.
Excellent. I always, as I mentioned to you, always ask this question, how do you serve mankind? And I throw that question to people because I want the audience as well to understand that their time here on this planet is not just about them. It's about others as well. And I always invite them not to be too selfish, but I know there's a price to get to that place where you and I are. And I always invite them to hurry up and become servants. So I'm going to ask you individually, Robert first, how do you crystallize as your, tell people it's our assignment. We didn't come here for a job. This is our assignment. How do you crystallize your assignment?
Beautiful question. I love that, especially the whole aspect of crystallization. So I would say that very succinctly, for me, I have come into human form to help people to reconnect into their soul's remembering.
Yeah. And Gary?
Wow. Big question. Yeah. Service to self first. And then from there, it would be service to others would be to help ground in the knowledge that they learn and to go forth and teach others.
I think, and I try to explain this to others. We're all teachers. We're all of us are. But we're being used to teach and bring out different insight. The concept that turns me on and gets me excited above all things is that the world is full of, I think it was almost 3 billion people. And I believe that this whole thing is designed for each one of us to go into our journey and extract stuff that will exercise and excite all of these 3 billion. We would look at that thing and we'd get so happy and like, my God, I never saw that before. I never saw that. And I can picture a place like that where we can have that conversation of all of us going through our journey and yet coming out with a different aspect, insight that was able to excite all of us. Let me ask you, Gary, one of the ways we travel back, I tell people we go back in time via the memory, that time machine, and go back to the first location that we reside, because that space right there, some information is deposited on us. We also will interpret some incidents that will traumatize us, and we began to learn about how to manage relationships, how to hide things, how to pretend, if you will. What was your family unit like?
Family unit. How long do we have? mother, father, and sister. I came into that relationship to find out about love. And it was demonstrated clearly to me what love isn't in their eyes. They did the best that they could, especially with my father. And I knew at a very young age that I wasn't going to grow up to be like him. He was a good mirror of what not to be human, I guess, or a behavioral of a human. Of course, you go back, he had to go back to his childhood and what was his childhood about. But that's another story. The thing is, I was always connected, looking back at my human history, going to run 4 again when I was taken downstairs out of my room by a spirit and taken into the lower part of the house. And I remember clearly dancing with 4 spirits in the basement of this house that I was in. And I realized that they've been with me all along. So they're my guides, when you could say, and my teachers and my support.
Yeah, I tell people that around us, in this dimension, we have we're energy moving at a certain speed, if you will. Everything that we look around is at a different speed. And there are beings around us constantly. They're just moving at a higher speed that we cannot notify and see them. But sometimes they slow down and gives us an opportunity, like they did with Gary. It'll give you an opportunity to engage. And those times are always precious from it. What was your family unit like?
Yeah, so for me, mother, father, 2 older sisters, a younger brother, and they were always very supportive. Of course, every family, I believe, has learning to do, and you come into that family to learn different things. So there was always like a lot of support. And I think for me, one of the greatest gifts that was given to me through my family was that they always had a way to trust me in my decisions. And I remember many years ago when I departed corporate Canada, and I called my parents, and my parents were very supportive in helping me go to university. And I was fretting about calling them to say, I'm departing my career and I'm stepping into something completely different. And the response that I got back from them was, it's always worked out for you. Whatever you've decided, even if it's off the beaten path, it's always worked for you because you've always trusted yourself. So they essentially said, keep trusting yourself. And of course, it wasn't without its limitations. So it's looking at where I had been programmed to limit myself. And it's funny because I actually coached my brother as well for about 6 months as an executive coach, career coach. And he had totally different memories of the same scenario that I had. And I was like, oh, yeah, I remember that, but tell me about it. And his recall of what happened was very different. And so, yet at the core of it, there were the very similar programs that were in operation that were limiting him that I had sort of come through. So I learned from that familial paradigm, and then I shared that with him. And as a consequence of that, he's been able to grow.
Yeah, isn't it a wonderful thing when you have 2 individuals within the same circumstances, the same situation, how they have different perspectives, and their perspectives is the view by which they are going to make decisions and lifetime changes and stuff like that. And it's really something that's always been fascinating to me as to how us human beings take data and how we convert it and present it based on all of the filters of thoughts and different things that we have within us. And we present a different outcome. And 2 people are sitting in the same thing, as fascinating as it comes. And I've always loved that stuff. Here you guys on different locations, if you will, and you're in the core of the family, and they began to deposit stuff in you guys, and you guys mentioned some of the things that the gifts that they have given to you. those gifts and those interactions that you had with them, Robert, how did they begin to form you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think it's all about modeling the thoughts, feelings, and actions, and we believe that they're normal. And I think from a very early age, bless her soul, if she ever listens to this, I was sort
You
of
could tell
taught
her.
that everything had to be that everything had to be dramatic. Yeah, everything had to be dramatic.
What are you
And
talking about?
and it wasn't until I think it was in 2007 I went on a retreat, and it was a beautiful retreat. There were about 25, 30 people there. We were together for about 10 days, really bonded with some people. And when it came time to end the retreat, I got very emotional. And I, number one, because I bonded with the people at a different level than I had ever bonded with people. And then number two is I really didn't want to go back to corporate Canada. I didn't want to go back to my life that I had created, but I was told and programmed to believe that you go to university, you get a great job. Once you get that great job, then you've made it, and then you stay in that job until retirement. And then once retirement comes, then you go and do the things that you really want to do in life. And 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 then on top of that as well, during the retreat, someone approached me, lovely soul, and she said, Rob, I'm going to invite you to de-dramatize. And I looked at her and I was like, I was crying. I was a blatting mess. And I was like, what are you talking about? And she said, if you de-dramatize, things will get easier. And it was a gentle yet firm slap to basically say there's some programs within you that aren't serving you. And it can be easier. It can be like one of the things that we invite all of our clients is when they accept an invitation into a journey is we invite them to intend that everything from this day forward is with ease, grace, flow, and trust. And that's something that both Gary and I have come up with together because I think the ease and the grace wasn't necessarily there. It was in different respects, but we could expand upon it. And then trusting that everything is for you. Everything that you're moving through is for your greater growth by the grand design of as a function of being human on planet Earth. So I think there were seeds that were planted, but some of them still had the hard husk over the seeds. And yeah, so ease, grace, flow, and trust was something that both of us have had to sort of expand upon in our lives.
Yeah, I think that's just part of the process that one identifies those, I would say, mindset and those thoughts pattern that we have to learn and companions that we have to hold on to walk with through our journey. Awareness, I tell people, it is the beginning of our journey. When one becomes aware, becomes the observer. When you look into your life and go, wait a minute, that's it right there. And when you begin to become that individual, I call that individual the perpetual investigator of the self. You are going to probe and probe and probe. And same question to you, Gary. How did the interaction with family, how did it begin to form your way of thinking? How do you process things? Because one of the reason why I ask these questions, guys, it begins to set up our relationship styles, how we engage with others. How was that with you and your family? How did it begin to form your thoughts pattern, your behavior, all of that?
Good question. Looking back now, I think the thought pattern was like I didn't quite understand what anger was all about. Is I would observe, and as like I was very confused, is like and very upset. Is like, why do these two people, argue or get angry? And of course, there's sometimes substance, alcohol is involved that changes the psychological thinking of the human. It interferes with their logic side of thinking, just saying it politely.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think looking back at my parents, honestly, they let me explore as much as I could. Sure, my father had his paradigm about you're going to play baseball, you're going to play hockey, you're going to play all the manly sports that you're supposed to do when you're a young man growing up, and you're going to like it. Well, I didn't last in any of those selected sports my father thought I should be in. I was, from a very young age, a performer. I directed my own shows in the backyard when I was a kid. I was always the lead in my life. And I think my parents, looking back, how much he tried, my father especially, my mother was a good one of saying, just let him be. And that's how I live my life, as I always say to Rob. Everybody should just be here, be now, and be in
Yeah,
the moment.
absolutely.
Looking back, I was always in theater, and then I eventually went to theater school. And if you know anything about theater school, they basically look at your paradigms, your habits, and your upbringing to sort of break that away so you can step forward into your true self.
Yeah, well, you had started dancing much early. You had partners that no one would have understood. And so I'm sure that that relationship opened other aspects of your being that would not be open had that not happened. So yeah, you were chosen, if you will, to partake of where you're at in life. And so I tell people everything we do in life, everything, I don't care where you work. And I tell people this because I want them to learn to be present in their work. I don't care what it is. You will learn principles, you will learn things that will be utilized in your life at some point. You're in training, I tell people. Most of us are in training. If you work at some of the most mundane things, you're learning about customer skills and so forth. You may be learning about discipline. All of these little things that you don't pay attention to. It comes into play when one begins to embark on that journey of self-development. You realize, wait a minute, and then that is being used later on in life to help free yourself and others. High school guys. And you see how I'm walking you guys out, because we're got to go to college because we're going to be, again, dealing with relationships, and you begin to form and begin to look at some of the insights and the interplay when we're dealing with the high school folks, because you know how we are in high school. They can be beautifully mean, some of them. So what was your experience in relationship with others outside of family when it comes to the relationship aspect? What was yours like, Gary, when you began to engage with others outside of family and outside of your guides that were teaching you the spiritual world in your home? What was that like?
Yeah, I think looking back, I had a good connection with children my own age growing up, especially in high school. There's people you just know not to hang around, and they just don't make you feel good. So even if I'll be honest, I hung out with the girls because I understood girls and girls understood me, and there was no fear involved with them. They were just like, you're another person, I'm another person, and we just became very good friends. So my circle of friends were probably 15 or 20 girls. Sure, I didn't know at the time I was gay, but as life went on, it was like, oh, that was a safe circle to be in. There, I haven't spoken, but I was bullied in school, probably grade 8 or grade 9, I think it was. But it didn't last very long because I didn't respond to their need for me to engage in a fight with them, and they were just tormenting me. And eventually I got the school to take care of it for me and said, listen, and you'll find people to help you in situations like that. You're never alone. If you can't deal with it yourself, then you have to ask for help. And that's what I've learned, that through friendship, that you have to be open and willing to receive assistance from others and friendships. And where else can I go from this? Graduating from high school was great. Am I connected to anybody from high school? Probably two people. But I know if I did call on somebody from high school that was very close to me, they would connect, I'm sure, and vice versa.
And Robert, yourself, how is that with you and, again, relationships, the aspect of developing that and functioning on your own with developing and moving through in relationship?
Yeah, it's interesting. I haven't thought about this in such a long time, so it's a great question. I was someone who was like involved in almost everything that I could outside of the home. Not from the aspect that I was running away from anything at home, but I wanted to be involved. So I loved academics. I loved school. I loved learning. It came easy to me. I played sports as well. So in the high school that I went to, a lot of people who did well academically also did well in sports, which is a little bit different than probably the stereotype. Had a mix of sort of guys and girls, but probably leaning more towards female friends. And again, because there was that safety. And I think even looking back to my childhood, I didn't know this until later on in life that I was very empathic and I could feel other people. I could feel their emotions. And so I just, as Gary said, like I felt safe in that circle with more girls as opposed to guys, and there was never any judgment. So yeah, anytime I felt judgment, then it was sort of I could feel it. I could feel that resistance, and then I would steer away. But yeah, super active academically in the sports, and also yeah, anything that I could learn something new in. So I just always loved being social as much as I could. Also because I think part of like I grew up in rural Nova Scotia, and as a function of that, it was a little bit isolating because you can't just walk across the street. It wasn't in a neighborhood, so. But I think it was preparation for what was to come.
Yeah, always, man. That's why I said to people, everything that you do in life is preparation. And again, I say it to people who are now starting maybe, and they're having they're working in a tough place. Learn to be present, learn to learn, be open, be aware, ask questions of those around you. Gary had mentioned something, one of the powerful tools that can be used against bullies is not to recognize what they are saying, totally ignore them because they're looking for that attention. They're seeking attention. It's just this way is how they seek attention. And when you don't give them that, there's no satisfaction there. And so they kind of just walk away. And he mentioned another thing that you have to be aware of. In this life, each one of us have to find our tribe. You are not designed to do this alone. You have to find your tribe, whatever. Some of them will look as like therapists. Some of them will look as like guides, and in some cases, preachers and teachers and all of these different things, close friends. But you need your tribe. Your tribe is going to be there to give you some encouragement because there are going to be dark times, and that's the purpose of your friends. They also are there to locate all of those scotomas that you have that you are not aware of, and your tribe will make you aware of it, and they will say things like you're a prick and wonderful descriptions of stuff of who you are because they're seeing something, and they will describe what they're seeing after they call you that wonderful name. And most of us react out of anger or whatever because it's a sensitive situation. They see something. But as we walk through the journey, we have to recognize those times And then we have to acknowledge, okay, they see something. Maybe I need to go in and discover what makes me a prick. And as you dive in, you'll get some wonderful revelation as to who you are. And that's this thing about what we call the journey. You're not perfect, but you are deep. And that's the fun part. So here you guys are, both of you. You're making it through. You found your security, if you will, in the arena of high school, and now you're looking to go further out because you're moving into your life. You're going to become quote unquote an adult and responsible adult. I love that. I'm still trying to figure it out because I have problems doing that. But as we make our way through life, leaving the nest, if you will, I always ask this question because it pulls a lot of things out of people. What field, I know what Gary had said, what field did you pick and why did you pick it? Because some incidents sometimes happen and just change our life in one direction and stuff like that. And so, which field did you pick, Gary, and why did you pick it? I know you had alluded to what it is, but why? What is the deepness of to why you did that?
Good question. Is the why? Why did I choose that path? Is like, I don't think I ever asked that. Why did I? Because I just innately knew this is what I wanted to do. And this was my calling to go to theater school and to perform. You know, when I was younger, my parents says, well, what do you want to be? That typical question, what do you want to be when you grow up? It's like, I'm 10. How am I supposed to know what I want to be? But as time went on and going through high school, it was either become a veterinarian or a dentist. And then as time went on, it's like, I don't want to be any of that. I don't want to look at anybody's mouth, and I can't look after pets. I can or operate. And I was always performing in school, so I knew this was the drive and the key to where I was going. And it's so funny. I did my audition for the theater school and just went in knowing that I was going to get accepted, and they didn't make a decision until 2 weeks later. But at the audition, I said, "So when do I start school?" So I've always had that thing. I know this is what I'm supposed to be doing, and I know you're going to accept me, and I know I'm going to be great. And
It's already done.
it's already
Yeah.
done. It's like I know this path, and sure enough, I did get accepted. And I did a 2-year theater program, and then the best advice they ever gave me was take time off and travel the world.
Yeah.
Get life
Nothing like it.
experience. Nothing like it. Travel as much as you can. The theater, the acting, the performance will always be there for you when you need it, or for when you're ready, or when it's ready for you. And so I took their advice. I traveled for about 5 years on and off, and I ended up going to live in England for 9 years. The plan was to go back for a couple of months to, as I say, brush up on my Shakespeare. And 2 months turned into a 2-year program. And in that 2-year program, my calling came through, but at the time I didn't know it was until now. Well, until a while ago. The program I signed up for was called the Alexander Technique. And the teacher came up to me after 2 days in the course and said, Gary, I think you need to be an Alexander teacher and not an actor. And I looked at him like I was 24 years old. And it's like, I'm here to be a thespian, an actor, not to be a teacher yet.
Yeah.
So fast forward 9 years of living in England to work. I'm sorry?
Yeah, I said it's funny sometimes how people see.
Oh, it's funny as people see. Yeah. Oh, yeah, totally. It's like the thing is with the Alexander Technique, I innately knew what it was about. I understood thought and direction and ambition. And the teacher could see that immediately, how I was communicating that in my own way that I understood how to be. So after 9 years living in England, I went back to Canada. And a few years after living in Canada and Vancouver, they opened up a theater, an Alexander Technique school. And the teacher that I was seeing at the time says, you're becoming a teacher. And I went, yes, I am. I went back to school in my fees and did a 3-year teaching program, certified as an Alexander Technique teacher. And I've been teaching since 2005. So this is a big part of what we incorporate with the Journeyman Collective.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I love that story. One of the things that Gary had mentioned, guys that are listening, And I always invite my listeners, because that's how we begin the journey. We listen when we come to a podcast. But I always invite them to transition to becoming hearers. Hearer begins to listen intently, and it changes everything. It makes some things within you alert. Your ear, your Jesus made a statement. He says, "Let those who have ears, let them hear." So that means that there was another set of ears that someone have inside that you need to be aware of. And but there is a responsibility. He said, "Let them." They have to want to and want to make the change. So I always invite them to transition over, because if you listen to what Gary said, he laid out some really good stuff in there. One of the things that we talk about in this walk is faith. And faith manifests, I know we hear it in church system and the religious system, but he walked by faith when he walked into that audition. And faith is, you know that you know that you know. When you did a performance, and that's how I approached certain jobs when I went in. I would do my meditation and call it in and focus and so forth. And when I went to the interview, I had in my mindset that I was going to find out the day I was going to start and how much I was going to make. That's what I was going for. And when Gary went in there, he pretty much told him, when am I going to start this thing? And that is power, guys. When you know that you're transmitting energy to those individual there, and it activates another force that is out there. It's called grace. That grace is that power that works on the hearts of those that heard what he said. And it's so powerful that it caused them to react in what he knew was already his fate. Robert, your journey, what was it that spurred you to navigate the direction that you did?
Well, I think part of it was I always had curiosity. I was always one that was wondering what was possible. And so I was raised, my mom was a devout Catholic, and I was raised in that religion. I always because of my empathic nature, I always felt like something wasn't quite in the pocket with what was being shared. And there's brilliance there. And so when it came to university, I went down the scientific route, did 2 degrees, an undergraduate degree and a master's degree in science, specifically earth sciences. And I just had this, I grew up in rural Nova Scotia, very, very farm country. So growing up in rural Nova Scotia just allowed me to have a different sense of the natural world around us, and things just intuitively made sense to me. And then I started recognizing that geology, biology, physics, math, it all came fairly easy to me. And I had this innate understanding about the earth, about the human being, and earth sciences. It's we are, look at yourself, look at your hand, you are earth, you are nature.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Yeah.
that connection to nature was always there. So I think I chose wisely to sort of live into that, and it created a foundation of understanding the scientific world. And then as I was approaching my master's degree, I had what some would call an awakening. And I started to see energy around people. So this was 2003. Internet was a thing, but you weren't glued to it like we are today, where we have phones on us all the time. You can Google anything. And I was seeing light and energy around people. And the scientific paradigm created this idea in my mind that there was something wrong with me. And so I went on a journey for about 2 years trying to find out what was wrong with me. And all these specialists kept coming back to me in the sense that there's nothing wrong with you. I met synchronistically, went to a massage therapist who did a Reiki session on me, and there was a mystical phenomena that happened. There was bright flashes in the room that happened when I had my eyes closed and I could see them. And then all the curtains moved away from 3 of the walls that had curtains on them. And after the session, she said to me, "You have beings with you." And my scientific mind was like, "What are you talking about?" And however, because I saw what I saw, it was undeniable. And that's what cracked the door open. So I had faith, I had science, but it was like this new level was being introduced to me. And it was like, okay, let's bring different pieces of faith, different pieces of science with me to help me understand what's truly going on with me here. I met a spiritual teacher, and she, just like everyone else, said, "There's nothing wrong with you." She held my hand for a long period of time, and I could feel what she was doing. She was reading my energy, and she was really empathically, I could sense it. She could sense what I was sensing, and she said, "You're supposed to be seeing what you're seeing." So the metaphysical spiritual door started to open, and it was blown wide open. And then I had to contend with that fire hose of consciousness and learn how to manage it and learn how to work with it and learn how to work with it such that it wasn't freaking my scientific mind out to think, "Oh my goodness, there's something terribly neurologically wrong with me." But there was new parts of me that were unfolding.
That awakening is always fun. I know Gary was on that journey way before you and I. He started as a young in the basement. But I remember, of all things, I've never actually shared this story at all, guys. I was with a friend of mine, and back in the club days and so forth, and we were in the John, my best friend, and he came and he'd give me this breath freshener uh, container, and I actually thought it was breath freshener, and I'm like hitting it, and I'm like, I'm not tasting any of the breath freshener, the mint that we're used to. And he turns around to me and he says, "It's not breath freshener, it was acid." I was like,
Ooh.
"What?" And so we went to the girl that he had gotten it from, and I said to her, "What is going to happen to me?" And she looked at the bottle, looked at me, she says, "I have no idea. None of us has ever taken this much." And I was like, so I knew at that point I was on. I'm gonna be having a good night, if you will. I'm gonna be freaking out at some point. But one of the things, guys, that I saw on that trip, on that process, that my being was open, was I began to see everyone's aura. Everyone, everyone had an aura around them, and I remember, because for me and my background, guys, I was a pastor and I had walked away from, because of some of the things that I seen and whatever, but I was aware of the spiritual realm and spirits and so forth. And so as a pastor, I'm tripping, and I went and sat down and I'm watching everyone. And because of my knowledge in that realm, I wanted to get data as to exactly what's going on. And I remember sitting there being a student, high as a kite, but I was taking notes in my as to what was happening, and people. And I recognized evil people. I recognized people in light. It was amazing what I saw. And so I want to make you guys aware, we are energy. We carry an aura around us. Our guests, they're talking about that. Gary had an entrance to the spirit realm. There's another. I mentioned to you that there's beings moving around us at different speed, and they're there. Don't ever believe that they're not there. I mean, you know it, I know it, but conventional society does not want us to even believe that they're there, but they're there. And so here we have these both gentlemen now being aware. Gary's ushered into traveling. Traveling is one of the best ways to be open up. You learn empathy to a deeper degree because you're walking and seeing people of all culture, all creed, all beliefs, and you begin to become more and more empathetic and open. And walk open when you travel, you will learn much. And we know that Robert talked about being open spiritually from all of the things that he began to experience, and that scientific mind will be used because it all blends together. We just don't teach it that way. And so both of you guys are open up. You start in your journey, you're expressing who you are and becoming aware of who you are. Because I did the journey because I want people to see we follow the program and then something happens to us to start deprogramming us from the program. Robert, talk to us about your deprogramming as it begins to happen, because now everything is going to be pushed. You're going to question everything. The perpetual investigator of the self begins to take his position, and you want answers. Talk to us as you began to be escorted in that arena of the reality of you. How did it begin to impact your belief, your mind, your thought process?
That's a loaded question. We could be here for hours.
I told you guys this was going to be a different podcast, man. I
Yeah.
do it a little different.
I think for me, one of the things, the initial thing was that I had to start to really understand that I have always been empathic and I could always feel other people's energy, but I didn't know that it was impacting me the way that I thought it was. And I remember going into corporate Canada after my master's degree, and I started to get ill. And I know why, that I was being ushered into something else. And I love that word ushered, because I think there were all these different pivot points in both of our lives. I was like, okay, you're done with this. Now we're going to move you over here, and this is going to be the next part. So it was a deconditioning of, we haven't been taught everything that we're supposed to learn. So if I haven't been taught, then the opposing question is, what else am I to learn? What else am I to experience? What else am I to really hone into? That, wait a minute, like, my senses, known as the 3D senses of hearing, tasting, smelling, touching, there's more. There are subtle senses that are there. So one of them being empathic, I was feeling energy, feeling people, and seeing started as well. Smelling energy also came online later on, and you can feel it, you can hear it. And when you really start to hone into those signs and the patterns that are showing up, and then also being like that perpetual investigator, I believe that that's the law of perpetual transmutation, that we all have unknown aspects of ourselves that are to be illuminated. So I wonder what parts of me want to be illuminated. And luckily for me, and I think for Gary too, that we were always protected with our guidance system. So the challenges, the learnings were still intense, but it was almost like we were optimizing the highest harmonic of energy at all times, and the law of efficiency of, like, okay, let's bring them into and through these growth challenges. So we always just said, okay, this is where I'm headed now, and let's see what I'm going to grow through as I head in this direction. And so some would maybe call it being goal oriented, or just focus. Like, for instance, 2006, I decided to move from Calgary to Vancouver, and I was going to leave my job. I was going to leave my home and move to Vancouver, and I just knew it was going to happen. And within, I think it was like 4 months, it all clicked into place. And then a month after I moved there, I met Gary, and it all just happened because I wanted to know myself more. I wanted to, with the law of perpetual transmutation, I always tell people it's like you're going to be eating a bowl of black sesame seed ice cream. It's the unknown, and you get to take that black sesame seed ice cream and create with it. So what are you going to create? What is your soul? What is your spirit calling you to co-create with the creator?
That is so well put. And as you guys stated, both of you in different ways, that we are calling when we have gone through the processes that we've gone through and we have become servants, if you will. We are assisting others to learn to remember who they are because, and again, I grew up in a church and I use this analogy, and I was a pastor as well, as I mentioned to you guys. And in my belief system, guys, they said that this creator showed up. And I always tell people creation is always darkness first. You got to have some darkness in your life for the creator to come out, because your creator is sitting there and ain't doing nothing. You've been drinking all day long. He's putting him to sleep. You've been depressed and he's gone. So that creator is sitting there. And so this creator that I read about, he shows up and this place is a mess. And he's like, well, I need some light. And the process of creating, one must become exact in what you want. And we are creating. He said, let there be light. And he begins to call all these things. And he's very specific. And he created it. And then he releases this man. He takes this mud and then he releases this creature. And I said to the pastors that I was at in the conference, I said, where was the man when God was creating the earth? Because I knew they were plugged in and they wouldn't be able to answer such a simple question because they all been programmed. And they kept staring at me, and I said, where was he? He never answered. I said, he was creating the earth with God. And then when they got finished, he released him and he said, this is yours. Be the God of this dimension. And so what we have lost our way, and what we are doing as like you, we are engaging in remembering who we are. The journey does that. And once we've gone through and remember, and we will continue to remember every day, the perpetual investigator will continue to ask questions because we want to know. But you, Robert, had already decided. You had decided already. And because you had decided that you were going to leave and all of those things, you were in partner with the Creator, creating circumstances that would release you and bring you to where you are. We don't notice it until afterwards. But that knowing was already inside you, and you knew it. You said it. I knew that I was out. And then you began to, the behind the scenes takes place. And then one day you ushered out, and we call it synergy. We began to see how things fall in place. But you had ordained that already, because you are a creator just like the creator. And we are just remembering, guys, who we are, and that's the journey. So here you are, Gary. You have been ushered in. You have been released as a young individual, and you're now traveling. You've been exposed to the different mindset and all of these things that you're learning. I want to ask, when was your interruption, if you will? All this fancy life we are living, and then there's this interruption that takes place that begins to propel us and move us forward. And then Robert had talked about, because I want to come to how did you guys meet and what did that look like? Because there are always, again, circumstances behind the scenes that puts that together. And then we call it synergy. But we were working on it months before, not knowing that we were creating this moment. What was your awakening like, Gary, when you began to move forward in your life?
Sure. I'll recall one. Well, it was quite impactful. I went back to Victoria, where my family is, and I was staying with a friend. And him and his wife were involved in the church. And they said, why don't you come to church one Sunday morning? And I wasn't a churchgoer. And I thought, okay, I'll go and be part of the congregation and listen to what they have to say. And we'll say the lecture was about thorns, burdens, and crosses that we carry. And funny, the night before, my best friend and I were talking about, the family dynamics and how our parents are getting older and how there's a bit of a burden and that we have to carry them through to their transition. And that Sunday, the minister stood up there and talked about Christ removing thorns, burdens, and crosses off your shoulder. And as you imagine this, then you do prayer. We were into prayer. And Christ came and lifted the thorns and burdens and crosses off my shoulders. And I felt it, really felt it. It's like, holy shit. And I began to cry. And my friends are going like, what's going on? I said, well, the minister said that Christ was going to come and I believed him. And sure enough, he answered my prayer. And it's like, it happened. So it's like, I was a bit overwhelmed by the whole experience. And I told a friend back in Vancouver, and she introduced me to I'll call it a spiritual center called Unity, on non-denominational teaching.
I'm familiar with that.
She says, I think you'll like the minister that's there. It's more of a lecture than a sermon, and you'll really enjoy this energy around the building within the congregation. So I went and listened to this man. I went, I'm home. This guy I understand. And I say that's a big part of both Robert and I have been with Unity for a number of years. I say 30 years with me. I was devout, I'll say, but I was a believer in self-growth. I learned about meditation, energy, manifestation, and all those beautiful things that help us grow as a human moving forward. And where else can I go with this? So that was a major awakening. And then from there, we have callings, don't we? There's signs out there always on the streets or in the numbers. So I'll say 1111 was a big play in my growth. And one time I just saw too many triple digits for one day, and Google had just come up online, and I thought, well, let's use the magic Google. And sure enough, I typed in 1111 and there was a website. I went, holy crap.
Oh, yeah.
There's a website and it says, your celestial beings are knocking on your door for you to wake up more. Are you ready to answer the call? And I went, oh, yeah, I get it. I understand. Now I see and hear all the signs that were coming to me all this time. So that was another awakening. And now let me keep it quick that night there was a party happening in my building. The party wasn't in the building, it was in my front living room. And I got up wide awake. I could hear all these noises and chatter. And I went in the room and I didn't see them, but I could feel them. And I says, all right, I get it. Silence. They were celebrating that Gary finally woke up to another level of being. And so, those were two major kickstarts along with my childhood to lead me in this path that we're in, and always trust the next step.
I love you guys' stories because the thread that you see in both of you is the ability to recall. You said it, you label it as just trust, and I call that a degree of surrendering that we have learned through life and the pressures of life, and to surrender. And when we do that, a lot of things began to happen to us because that concern of worry and anxiety and all of those things vacate. We just learn to be and allow the situations to manifest and all of the other things that are necessary to manifest. That takes time. But only once we surrender, then it'll manifest a little faster. But if we struggle with it, the struggle is the prevention of the flow. Once we surrender, because I always tell the story of Jesus in the garden arguing with his father about doing an assignment. His father says, well, this is the assignment. He's like, no, man, I ain't going to do that. And he's arguing with his dad. He says, you got to get to the cross, bro. He's like, no, we're not going to do that. And he had this conversation. Apparently, I was reading that he sweat blood. I was never that in that situation where I was sweating blood, I kind of quit somewhere. So it means that he was really struggling about what he had to do. And so, but he did something. He said, "Not my will, but thy will." And so we all have to get to that place where we go, "It's not my will," you know, because of whatever belief system we have. But when we come to that place to surrender, everything is right beyond that door, just waiting, and always has been waiting for us to get to that place of surrendering. And that place, to me, I tell people, it's a humbleness happens to you. You are looking at your ability and you're saying, I don't have it. I don't have it. I have to trust someone bigger than me to take me to this next level. And that's when we surrender. And in both of your lives, you guys have exercised that to an incredible degree. Because even when Robert talked about his family coming to him and say, when he told them it was time to leave, and they said, "Well, you've always trusted yourself, you've always surrendered, and it always worked out." And so I want to, now both of you have gone through so much. Gary talked about some of the tools that he brought into his life, meditation and all of these different things. Let me ask you, Robert, first meditation. Then I want you guys to talk to me about that day. The day when you guys looked at each other and you met. What tools, Robert, did you bring into your space to assist you through those hard times, those dark times that meditation saved my life, man. I'll tell people that over 100 times. It taught me how to control and pick which thought I will give permission to bear fruit in my life. I became a creator through my meditations. What tools did you bring into your space to assist you as an individual to transition from one perspective to the other?
Meditation as well. I would say that was the number one thing that really helped me to clear out the cobwebs, to witness the old thoughts. And when I actually had my awakening back in 2002, 2003, like there was so much happening around me. I had no way to explain it. So I thought something was wrong with me. So what happened? Things started going wrong with me physically. I lost a significant amount of weight. No one could figure out what was going on with me. And I started working with this spiritual teacher, started meditating. And the day that I was reading a book by this gentleman named Adam McLeod, it's called Dream Healer. And there was an excerpt in the book that said, look at yourself now. If you've been ill, look at yourself now. Are you okay in this moment? I was like, yeah, I'm okay. And now extend that to the next minute. And then extend that to the next 5 minutes, then the next hour. It's like, oh my goodness, I'm okay. I'm okay. And then with that thought, it was like, wait a minute, I've been focusing on what I thought was wrong with me when in actuality, they were gifts that were starting to pop up and out of me that wanted to continue to be unpacked. So meditation, curiosity, to wonder what was being shown to me in energetic form. And so luck would have it that the spiritual teacher that I was working with was putting on a workshop 3 blocks away from my apartment in downtown Calgary. And Calgary is a pretty big city. It could have been anywhere. The naturopath that I was seeing was also like 2 blocks away from me. So my whole team that had shown up to work with me was all like pretty close. Specifically, the spiritual teacher that I was working with, she worked a lot with the Ascended Masters. So Ascended Master Jesus, Mary Magdalene, Mother Mary, Buddha. And what started to happen to me was that I started to recognize many years later that the energies that I was seeing around me, around people, were like signposts of like, hey, this person needs some support with compassion. This person needs some support with vision. This person needs support with divine alchemy or trust. And now that I have spent the last number of decades sort of distilling that, that's how I show up to serve people and show up to help people by seeing those signs around them. And I'm not necessarily going to walk up to someone and say, hey, do you know that Ascended Master Mother Mary is with you right now? And she wants you to trust yourself more and to like really expand your capacity to trust. No, there's more eloquent ways to work with it. But that's just understanding, like the title of this podcast is Threads of Enlightenment, that when we take that ball of threads that are unknown, or it might look like something that the cat has just played with, and if we start to pull on those threads, we can weave our own reality into existence when we hand ourselves over to that divine current that's always flowing through us.
I love that, man. So talk to us about that day, because I love how you guys are saying it, and synergy, as I said, but I tell people that we are the creators. We're the ones that are setting up all these things, along with the, some people will say the universe, some people will say God, Great Spirit, but we are working in conjunction. As I stated in the beginning, we were working in conjunction from the beginning, but we have separated ourselves, and so we are now finding our way back, if you will. As your tribe is close by, because that's how you set it up. So everything is how you set it up. We're just walking into it. And now you guys had ordained this meeting. How did it come about?
Well, I think both Robert and I were big believers. Write it down and send it off to the universe and let the universe assist you to find what is it that you want to manifest. I think both of us put it down and never looked at it for quite a while. Robert, I'll fill in everything. Robert did come into the store prior to us meeting eye to eye. And I don't recall seeing Robert in the store at the time because I guess I wasn't ready to see Robert, or who knew?
I might have been the disruptor or the interrupter.
Yeah, totally. It was like a little glitch in the matrix there. It was like just a little shock to wake you up. So he observed me, but at the moment I wasn't observing him. And then a few months went by. He ended up getting a job in Vancouver, and he used to work in a Whole Foods grocery store. And this is while I was going to school. And he came in the store. I was guest service manager, and I was providing excellent guest services. And I bagged his groceries, and cashier said to me, he says, "So what do you think of him?" I said, "Not bad. Great hair, good eyes, big nose, great teeth, had a beautiful smile." He says, "Well, he's checking you out in the window at the front end of the store." So we all looked, and sure enough, Robert was slowly walking by the store. And I worked on Thursdays and Sundays nights. It happened to be the same nights that Robert would come into the store and do his shopping. And I had my front end cashiers keep an eye out for my mystery shopper, and they would call me down and say, he's in the store, and I would come down and provide excellent guest services. He was in the tea aisle one night, and I used my best thespian knowledge and said to him, "To tea or not to tea?" And he looked at me and he went, "To tea." And I went,
with a raised eyebrow.
yeah, it's like, who is this guy? And he said, "To tea." And I went, "Good answer." And from there, we went on a date or two, and we just knew deep down that we were to meet. And this is not our first time meeting in this realm of reality. We've met many, many times.
And once you've met and you guys began to engage and began to speak, if you will, began to open to each other and share the wisdom, the knowledge, the insights that you have gained over time. How did you begin to put it together where you are now working together as servants to assist others in their journey? How did it came about? And there's a degree of surrendering even in that, and coming together as a unit to serve, because there's always challenges, if you will. And some days I'm sure you look at each other and go, well, just move on the other side, man. Let me give me 5 minutes. Let me just calm down before, because we are individuals and we have perceptions that we are still learning to surrender and learning to navigate through. How did you guys put that team together? And how did you develop your programs, your processes now by which you are going to be serving others to see who they are?
Yeah. So I think I'll just quickly draw the curtain back a little bit there, in that when we met for the first 5 years, everything was, for the most part, pretty easy. Everything was flowing relatively easily. And then on the 5th-year anniversary, Gary's dad was diagnosed with brain cancer. Our cat was diagnosed with jaw cancer. And I can't recall if there was a third thing or not, but that's when we weren't necessarily going into a tailspin, but there were things around us that were going into a bit of a tailspin. It was like, oh, here we go. So the first 5 years provided a great foundation. The next 5 years was a bit tumultuous, and I started my own coaching practice in 2015, bringing everything together that I had learned. Gary had been teaching since 2005 in his own private practice. And then Gary's dad passed away in 2013. And then Gary's mom said, I'd like to come live with you. And we looked at her and we said, well, we live in a 2-bedroom, 1-bath apartment in a condominium in downtown Vancouver. There's no way we can do that. We'll have to find another arrangement. Again, we surrendered to the process and everything worked out pretty effortlessly. We sold our condo, or she sold her home. We sold our condo. We purchased a home together, and it was all like boom, 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 really, really quickly. And then, so Gary's mom lived with us for 3.5 years. That in itself was a learning experience, which could be another full hour. I'm gonna basically 3.5 years.
Always
Yeah,
hours,
3.5 years. Yeah, 3.5 years of experiencing that reality. And she decided to exit stage left. So she transitioned. She passed away very quickly. And that was another big pivot point that rocked our worlds. And it was the first time that we had lived with someone and they had passed away. So every morning, waking up, walking down the hall and be like, she's no longer there. She's there, but she's no longer there physically. And it was like that good old adage of life is short. What the heck are you doing here? Why are you here as a human being? Are you living into your fullest, highest potential? Are you living into your highest purpose? And depression, grief set in. Gary was even experiencing anxiety. And I think it was, again, by design, a month after Gary's mom passed away, this little woman came into her life and said, you guys might want to think about going on a mushroom journey. And I immediately scoffed at her and said, I've done mushrooms before. Like, I've done them in university. How is that going to help? And she was like, no, you might want to consider it. And so fast forward, I think it was about 4 or 5 months later, I found myself in my very first shamanic medicine journey and had a profound experience, which again could take more than a full hour to talk about. I remembered more deeply into who I am, remembered more deeply into the support crew that's with me and that's supporting me. And there was a rejoicing moment in that journey when they recognized that I recognized them. And it was kind of like a Houston, we have liftoff for the next round of development. And came back from that journey. I had found my joy again. The depression and the grief had lifted. I found a new level of devotion to my clients, in that the conversations that I had had with the medicine man were the conversations I wanted to be having with my clients. And so it was another sort of pivot point, and came back from that journey, and I was in meditation and I asked what the next step was, and I saw myself training with the medicine man. I said, dear Lordy, is this what I think it means? And so I'll pass the mic over to Gary to give his part in that too, because I know he saw a big shift in me, like the lights were back on. And
yes, when Robert came home, it was like well, you could sense the energy shift in him, and he had like this glow about him. He was happy. He wasn't sad or depressed anymore. So I thought, well, mushrooms can do this. I think maybe I should go on a journey. So I spoke to the medicine man and I booked in with him. And it just happened to be the day before was the day we decided to do celebration of life for my mother and spread her ashes. And then the next day was my birthday. And it was the best birthday gift I gave myself that anybody could give themselves. Yeah. I embarked on a journey for 3 days and went in open-minded, unknown what was going to happen or what was going to occur, and was pleasantly surprised, and came out of it with alignment, clarity of vision, purpose, and focus on what the future is supposed to be. I did say to Robert, there was a vision that we were supposed to be working with this medicine and move forward to present it to the world. We didn't know at the time what that would look like. We had all the personal development programs under our sleeves and under our belts and moving forward with that. And so we spoke to the medicine man and asked whether he'd be up to find our way to guide others in the path of self-discovery and deeper dive into purpose and who we are. And he said yes. And so that was the time the Journeyman Collective was born.
That is awesome. And for those that have been listening to us, and as I mentioned, I hope you guys have been hearing what they're saying. When you do the mushroom or the ayahuasca, like myself, it was acid, and if you are doing it with a purpose, because I understood spirituality, I backed up and I began to use it. When you are going purposely to do something, you are going with an expectation, you're going with open mind. It is like the elevator, you're taking the express elevator to where you need to be. But you have to come and be in the right space. You cannot show up with fearfulness. You cannot show up with all those dark feelings because they will greet you. You have to learn to release them because those dark places will take you places that you don't want to go. But once you've coming and you're coming with an expectation and an openness, that elevator will be able to take you to locations that you will not get any other way, because you are all the other dark thinking and thoughts that would prevent you from getting to that top floor is not there, because you are in a state that you can go to that floor without any hindrance. But you've got to make sure that the team that is around you that is dealing with that know what they're doing, familiar with the process, aware of danger zones, if you will, and gives you a degree of security, which is very important. That trust factor, once you are able to lay down and feel comfortable in your being, you will gain tremendous insight, will change your life, as it did these young men. It did mine as well. So there's nothing wrong with it. You just have to find the right people, the ones that are serious about what they're doing, understand the seriousness of it and what can go wrong, and that they're prepared for all of that. Because I know I've lost friends and people that went thinking it's like a weekend sport thing, and just coming out all kinds over the place, and has lost their minds. And that's why I told them, when you're approaching that type of stuff and spirituality, period, it is not a game. It's not a game. Go there with love, go there with expectation, all of those wonderful things, and they will guide you. Those energies will be there to meet you and guide you and show you some great, wonderful things about who you are and what you're capable of doing. So here, you guys, what a great space to receive the direction of where to go. As you begin to follow that direction, one of the most beautiful things that we as guides, I like to use the terminology. We are honored to see the transition that someone has from that dark perspective to that light perspective, that, so we call it the light bulb moment in many ways, but it is the opening of from the programming to the newness of them being creators. I want you guys to pick one. Take the time and think about it, or maybe you guys will synergize together, but pick one of those moments and talk to us about that. Because I asked this question because I want those that are on the podcast can see and have a picture of what they are capable of when it comes to walking and guiding someone. Pick an example, guys, and describe to us that, I call it that holy transition, that you and I that get an opportunity with humble heart we watch and we are able to witness one becoming who they are. Talk to us about one of those times.
Gosh, there's so many. So there's one that popped into my mind. He had a very traumatic childhood, very like on all levels, and he wanted to come in, and he was like, I hear people talk about spirituality, I hear people talk about the unity consciousness, the quantum, and I only have a very three-dimensional experience of all of that. There's something in me that tells me that it's there, but I've never experienced it. And he, because of the deep level of trauma, had never really experienced peace in his whole entire life, and came through the journey and sat at the table where we have our meals in our center, and he said, I don't know what this feeling is. I've never experienced it before, but I think it's peace. I think it's contentment. And he went all in, and he allowed himself to connect into that deeper level of an innate intelligence. And because of that, he now has access to it. He can work with it and does work with it every day. So instead of creating his life from the root of fear, he's creating essentially from the root of love, or the root of co-creation. And the level of prosperity in his life is going to be infinitely multiplied because he's actually working with the infinite, as opposed to working with fear, because no one had taught him. So helping someone else turn their own inner lights on when no one has shown them you must fear everything in life. I think is like one of the greatest moments for me anyway. How about you?
And Gary, what was your individual that came to mind?
Is a doctor, and it was about his physicality that was gone wrong, because being an Alexander teacher, I was observing how he moved, and we meet people on Zoom, so we only see you basically from shoulders up. We don't know how you move or how you present yourself in the world. And when he came in our door, I thought, this is going to be an interesting journey with this man. And after his journey experience, we were sitting down having a meal, and him and I were left alone having a conversation. And a gift that came to me through the journey process is that if I see it, I believe it. And I was observing that there was a young man outside the window looking in. And I said to the doctor, I said, there's an 8-year-old boy outside the window looking in, and he wants me to ask you to tell about your time when you were 8, what went wrong. And he gave the story of when he was 8, he got disciplined at school a number of times from a teacher with a spoon, I would say, or
A mallet or something.
some spanking apparatus, that he would get spanked for being outspoken or late or anything that he did. But when you go to get spanked and you see somebody, they pull their bottom in and stick their feet out. So he walked like in plie position, if you know anything about ballet, or like a duck. And it realized that pattern had stuck with him since he was 8. The gentleman was probably in his late 30s at the time when he came through a journey. And the beautiful thing is, we cried. It was a great release. We woke up in the morning, both Robert and I looked out onto the property, which was 5 acres. And this 38-year-old man was like an 8-year-old running knee toe properly, not like a duck, we'll say. And it's like he had discovered, it's like he freed himself up of that unconscious held behavior that he didn't really knew or could remember until that moment through the journey process. So that was a beautiful moment in this man's life, focusing on what had happened in the past to guide him for his future forward.
Beautiful, guys. Beautiful stories. All of you that are listening to us and have been listening to us, we're going to provide everything for you to get to them, and you need to get to them. Get into their space. We're going to provide all of that. They mentioned about Zoom contacts and how they deal and have the programs. Get into that space. All of you that are struggling and don't understand, you're there. And we understand that, most of us are busy with life. I have a couple of gentlemen that will introduce you about living to their fullest, understanding who you are. Trauma is stored emotion. An incident happened at some point in our life, and we did not know how to respond with that. And we held on to that emotion, and most of us are not aware of it. That is why I start the conversation when we were young, because things happen there. And something could be very simple, and something could be really, really painful as well. But that trauma and that emotion is stored there, and it manifests over years in depression, suffering, arthritis, physical ailments, because it's trapped. But when you have guides like Robert and Gary that are there to bring you to that place, and you recognize that emotion, and when that release comes, it comes in many different forms. People cry, people laugh, people curled up. I've seen people curled up. I've seen many different ways of expressing the release of that trauma. When they do, it tells us there's this principle. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Whatever that truth is that you need to know, when you know it, and you have guides like these taking you through, when you locate that truth, you will be set free. And we're going to provide all the links for you guys to get access to them. Gentlemen, you have been the longest I've ever interviewed someone, because it's so rich, and I learned so much from you. I've seen from both of you your empathy and the deepness of that. And I learned a degree for myself, to learn to even surrender more, like what you guys have done from day one. And I am totally honored that you're here, and you have taught me this personally from our conversation, that I need to learn to walk in a space of surrendering a little more. And so I want to thank you for that. Thank you both for coming to Threads of Enlightenment.
Thank you, Ken. This was wonderful.
Such a pleasure.
Thank you both. Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning in to Threads of Enlightenment with Ken Primus. Hopefully you're now feeling more empowered to overcome the challenges in your life, whatever they may be. Share that inspiration with others by telling them about this podcast, rating it, and of course, remember to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. For more connection, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram by searching for Threads of Enlightenment. Until next time, stay enlightened.